morning and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Vincent Mauro Jr. makes New Haven tick off and behind the scenes. He's in his second decade now as chair of the Democratic Town Committee, Mr. Democrat, and former host on this station of a show I miss so much, the Cannoli and Knish Sports Hour.
I just texted Adam and Joel saying I'm back in our own stopping grounds, and Joel reminded me this is where I threatened to beat him up. So
why are we threatening to beat him up? Because you said about the Mets?
Because he's a Mets fan, yeah.
Okay, but they get enough abuse. You don't need to.
I know it was.
Any chance you guys will ever come back?
Listen, I keep trying to get those guys to come back, but Joel's a very busy man.
You still work for state senate?
Oh yeah.
Okay. He's sort of like the smart guy, right?
Yeah, he's the smart guy.
I noticed that.
Yeah, he's the smart guy.
Well, Vincent Mauro Jr., you and other Democratic officials across the country, you knew it was coming, I bet, but still, you got a surprise on Sunday when Joe Biden said he's not running for president again. And now, in under 3 seconds, it seems like the entire party nationwide is coalesced behind Kamala Harris as the next. How you feeling about the whole thing?
I think you got to break it down a couple different ways, right? I think as you look at the end of it, it's probably the best net result for the Democratic Party to have Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket. But I think when you take a step back and you go, okay, but how do we get here? I think the process sort of failed us in a lot of ways, and I say that understanding that I'm part of the process, but the process is important in this way. And I think the frustration that I've heard from people and then I've talked to and have thought about is President Biden didn't just happen overnight that he went from, most effective president of all time to what we saw at the debate and then that interview, right? I think
that's true.
But I think that's true. Like, so you had all these folks who are in the room and all the secretaries and of every department and the senators and the legislators and the representatives who used to walk out of that, and the reporters who walk out of the White House every day and they go do their press gaggle and they say, we just had this great meeting with the president and we agreed to this, this, and this. It's like, okay, well, 3 weeks later the guy can't put a sentence together.
And you saw like even this morning they had 2021 Pelosi had to stand in when he was meeting with House members about trying to get one of his bills passed, and after that day he never came back.
Right, and so that
was 2021.
Yeah, so I think that's part of the problem, right? So I think if there was a different conversation, or maybe just a more honest conversation, quite frankly, a year ago or a year and a half ago, then it's an open process, right? But everyone sort of kind of towed the line down there. And then as soon as it didn't work out, it's like, all right, yeah, he's got to go. It's like, well, why didn't you know? Why weren't you telling us earlier in the process?
Well, were you aware down at the local town chair?
How would we know, right? I mean,
so you never had conversations with people in Washington saying, hey, the guy's really kind of checked out?
Not one person ever said the guy's kind of checking out, right? Or, boy, we really should start thinking of something else. I mean, we're just locals, right? So, you got that infrastructure down in D.C., and it's like, basically,
So your gripe is with the party?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your party?
100%.
What do you think they should have done differently?
I think it should have just been more honest about it, right? Like, hey, he's not running. Mm-hmm. Let's do an open process.
And you had the problem now in those last weeks where we're showing people knowing he wasn't going to be able to run, but feeling scared to be the one who pushed him out.
Exactly. Well,
and that was
it's not pushing him out.
Thing about the family shielding him. Like, it does seem like his mind might have changed overnight on the weekend, no?
But I think it's more than that. Like, I was completely objective to sending letters asking him to step down, right? Because we had an election here, and he won. But you can't just throw it out, because, and this is what I equated to this. Like, you can't just say, okay, we don't agree with that election this time. Right?
So do you agree with Donald Trump, who said today, primary voters democratically selected? I mean, he's obviously trying to shield himself against.
Yeah, his is self-serving.
But
right?
I understand that. But his point seems to be like yours. There was a primary.
There was a primary.
So voters, so someone that's not supposed to change.
No, it's different. I think what he's saying is in a self-serving way. I think what I'm saying is the folks that were trying to push him out. I didn't agree with that process. I think
Well,
if he made,
were they wrong that you would have lost the House and Senate? Definitely?
I don't know. I mean, these guys listen to whatever consultants they want who'll charge them
But
and tell them.
America believed he couldn't do the job, including Democrats.
Oh, once again, I think if you go to the end, I think the Democrats are in a far better shape today than they were 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But the process still got to matter.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, I didn't agree with, like, trying to nominate someone from the floor if he wasn't saying, I'm not running. I just didn't agree with that process, because then why do we have an election? And once again, so it worked to your favor this time not to follow the process. What happens when it doesn't work to your favor and someone tries to do that?
I'm just playing a devil's advocate because I don't disagree with you. You can have a primary as part of the process.
Yeah.
Then something can happen, right? And obviously we know this was happening a long time. They weren't being honest about it. But theoretically, something can happen where someone could drop out of a race and there's still a process.
Yeah.
Is the process working now, given that he just dropped out? Is it happening the right way where people now, Harris has a majority of delegates. She's going to be the nominee. They're going to still do it electronically, which is based on a lie, which is that Ohio's law prevents them from. Ohio changed the law so they can go ahead. Why are they doing this electronic vote? They want to avoid a mess in Chicago at the National Convention, correct?
Right. I think, listen, the audience in Chicago isn't the people in the room.
It's TV.
Right. It's not the TV. Right. It's not the folks in the room. Right. It's the national audience that, I think at this point is actually going to pay attention. Right. I think.
But if he's already aren't they ruining their ratings by choosing the person in advance?
No, because I think, the vice president is still very much an unknown entity. Right. People need to know who she is.
So they want to watch. But she's not going to be on the stage 4 nights, right?
But the build up to her speech.
Gotcha.
Is going to define her and this race, right? And I think that's the issue here, right? I don't think she's known enough that people are like, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion, like, who she is, right? I think I just saw something that's been like 40 years since a Clinton, Bush, or a Biden has been on a ticket, right? I mean, it's, since 1980, right? I mean, like, there's been a Clinton, Bush, or Biden on the ticket, a presidential ticket.
It's your generation now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. So I think a open convention would harm her chances in November. So I think that's why they're going through this process now to sort of lock her in as the nominee.
And do you agree with that?
It's hard to agree with something that that you're not really familiar with, and it's uncharted territory. I mean, like I'm not sitting here with a tin hat on, but it just doesn't. It doesn't feel right.
Even this part.
But that's the important part, right? This is what it is, and I think we have to now focus in on what we are in far better shape today than we were.
And you're listening to WNHH-FM broadcast from Elm Street in New Haven, Connecticut at 103.5 FM. This is Dateline New Haven. Vincent Mauro Jr., Democratic Town Chairman, talking about the big news of the day, which is Kamala Harris. It looks like she's sewing up her delegates to be the best. So tell me why the Democrats are in better shape with someone who has a low approval rating, just jumped into a race against someone who's been running all year.
I think you're going to see, what Vice President Harris is all about, right? I think she's going to connect with people in a different way. I think it is generational in a lot of ways. You never know who someone's going to pick as vice president, but I would, if anyone would ask me, I would shy away from anyone of an older generation. I think she should literally run.
Well, we've looked at the top list. Mark Kelly from Arizona, who's 60.
Right.
And you got Governor Beshear, you got Governor
Right.
Shapiro, you got Governor Cooper, and you're looking all at people there in their 50s, right?
Right, and
40s.
I think you want to, if you're going to make it about, some sort of a generational change, then you got to sort of go all in on the generational change. If you're going all in on an electoral map, then you go in all in an electoral map. Right. So I think
the vice president, it's funny when people talk about getting a vice president who will help you in those states. I don't know if historically a vice president has ever helped win a state. I don't know that Al Gore got Tennessee, but what was interesting about when Clinton picked Gore in 1992, He said, I'm not picking someone from a different part of the country to balance a ticket. I'm going to double down on this approach we're giving of new Democrats from the South who are more moderate. Yeah. That's what made me wonder why no one's talking about the idea of having two badass women be the ticket.
Right.
You have like a Harris Whitmer and say, okay, there's some people who hate women. They're not voting for us anyway.
Exactly.
There are a lot more people who don't hate women and kind of will be excited about tough women who said we're going to stand up to a sexual predator, crook, macho man. Yeah. Grab them by the whatevers, and they're going to say, no, you're not grabbing mine, and, we're kicking you out. Why? But this isn't even on the table.
I mean, once again, who knows what's really on the table? I mean, you got just people just, spreading rumors for spreading rumors' sake.
Well, they are saying that Harris can't really like Kelly.
And, if that's the case, then you're going two West Coast candidates, right? And I think that's something to be said for that, too. Like, I think the days of, the balancing the East Coast and West Coast or the North and the South sort of has gone away because with social media now, everybody knows everybody. Like there's not the great unknown.
Is it funny how because Kelly's an astronaut, people say that makes him qualified? Because I was reading how the pundits all rank him. They said, well, some people, Shapiro's only in his, I guess he's in his second term, but there's another one who's in his first term. Yeah. And whereas Kelly was an astronaut, Kelly's in his first term as a senator. Exactly. He just started politics at that time. I don't get why being an astronaut, it's a good celebrity thing, which I think will play well.
Exactly.
I don't quite get the astronaut thing.
I don't understand the astronaut thing either. I mean, it's just it's something for the 24-hour media circus to talk
Who
about.
Who you rooting for? You rooting for anybody?
I not really. I think this is I'm not a firm believer in the you vote on the under ticket. I think this is about Vice President Harris's thought process. Like what's her priority, right? And I think part of this is when people select a lieutenant governor or they select a vice president, it's an insight into how they think too, right? You're thinking like, I gotta win, and this gives me the best chance to win. Am I thinking this person could do the job? Like what's the rational thought? So I think this is going to be an interesting first look into how her brain works. And
it's
in a situation
when you
like
talk
this.
about defining who she is. She did very poorly on the trail in 2020.
Yep.
The conventional wisdom is from media people who are rooting for Democrats to beat Donald Trump, so they have a bias.
Right.
The conventional wisdom is she couldn't be herself that year. You had the George Floyd police murder of George Floyd.
Yep.
It was very anti-police, and she was a prosecutor.
Right.
And even though that helped her in her debate with Mike Pence,
yep.
That she couldn't really be who she was.
Right.
And women often at that level, like Hillary Clinton, felt she couldn't be open who she was and relatable because people don't, have sexism. So their argument now is that she's going to lean into being a prosecutor, and she already is, right? She goes, I know who Donald Trump is. I prosecuted, sexual predators and scam artists and cheaters. Is that going to work? Is that how are you feeling about it? As someone who runs election after election, do you think Kamala Harris is going to sell?
I think she has every opportunity in the world to do it, right? I think this is and this is why, as much as the convention is a little messed up, it allows these 4 days to define who she is as a person, and which I think is going to be important. And then it's her job after that convention to go sell it, like to go sell this narrative of who she is. And the more genuine she is, the better off she's going to be, right? You can't fake this, right? You can't fake it, right? And that's the important part. Like, you can't fake this level of, she's going to be in front of crowds every single day for, from now until November. You can't fake it because, like, as soon as you start to fake it, everyone sees it.
And people want genuinity. I mean, it's kind of weird when we
that's why people like
Trump as a con artist. That's kind of genuinely who he is. It's like a huckster. People believe that.
Right. I mean, it's funny, and you didn't ask this question, but we were just talking about this. I was just thinking about the lasting legacy of Trump, whether he wins or loses, I think lasts far longer than his tenure, right? The lasting legacy of Trump is he has gotten whatever you want to define normal people as, normal people to start to question truth, right? I think that's the lasting legacy of this, right? And I'll use this
guy Lasivita who's running his operations. He did Swift Boat, kind of the most evil Orwellian attack on truth in the history of modern American politics, where you had a draft dodger running for president who was George W. Bush, like Trump, a rich boy draft dodger, running against a genuine war hero.
Yep.
And the way they turned out to the draft dodgers' advantage was to make up a story that take the truth against his heroism in this operation and pretend that somehow he had done something horrible in the war, which was totally untrue, totally unverified, just made up and somehow got through. So I think you're right. This idea of if you have a vulnerability, just say the opposite and say it's your opponent and make up something.
Yeah,
you're going to see that here.
And I think
with this guy. He's already said the election's not over on election day. Lecivitas said, if we lose, we're just going to keep fighting and they're going to make up stuff.
And I think that is exactly, but that lasting legacy here is he has gotten normal people, quote unquote normal, whatever the hell you want to call normal, right? And I'll use seeing as I'm sitting in the old sports studio here, I'll use a baseball analogy here. He's successfully gone after the umpires, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't like the story, New York Times is fake news. The Washington Post is fake news.
If you don't like Ted Cruz being in a primary, he stole. If you don't like your golf game, they cheated. If you don't like the last election, they cheated.
When it benefited him, Fox News was fake news, right? So he has gotten people to believe that nothing is believable.
Which is sort of Putin's approach, too.
Well, it's the downfall of social media because people get their news from, 30-second clips that have no validity. Right, so you're in the news business. You are in the news business.
So how do you deal with that in the politics business?
I don't know. Honest to God, I think these are the things that you struggle with. And listen, we'll manage to get through, next few years of this, but I fear it's coming, right? It's more and more of it is coming.
Deep fakes.
Yeah, it is. It's the I don't believe what I say. It's funny. I grew up watching WTNH Channel 8, right? That's what I grew up watching. Every night, you watch the 6 o'clock news. No one ever turned the news off and said, I don't believe them, right? No one ever, stopped believing what they read in the New Haven, Register.
I never believed
you might have.
I worked at a publication we corrected what they were lying about. Yeah.
But my point is no one read something and said, that's fake. Now it's just so common to hear people talk about it's fake. And listen, both sides are going to do it. But I think what he is normalized in a lot of ways is questioning whether people think the world is
right
flat
now you have
around.
You have a presidential campaign where a person, chief of your campaign operations, says we're not going to accept it if we lose.
Right.
So that's like a way to run for office now, like you're running twice.
Right. You're just like, I'm just going to take it to court.
But I have a little bit of hope about deep fakes is that there'll be a period, like when people pick supermarket tabloids up that make up stories about aliens meeting Clinton or whatever.
Right.
After a while, people kind of know that's fake.
Right.
So I wonder whether with deep fake video, because that's the most dangerous part, they had people with Biden's voice saying don't vote today and stuff like that in primary. I think people might get used to that and they can kind of have a genuinity monitor.
If there's a baseline that they still believe in.
Yeah.
Right. So my generation, your generation still has a baseline of truth to them.
That's in that, Trump's best buddies like Putin and Orban and in North Korea, their approach is to lie so much that people know they're not telling the truth, but they just don't believe anything anymore, and then they can do horrible
right.
acts.
So I think for my generation, yours, older generation, there's a baseline of truth that they always believe. What happens in 20 years from now or 30 years from now? Is that baseline still there or is it not there? I think those are the scary things when you take a telescope and you take a longer view of this. Like what people believe is truth and not truth is going to be something that, as crazy as it sounds, like we have to re-emphasize.
And we're talking
it's actually truth.
Vincent Mauro Jr., Democratic town chairman in New Haven, coming back to New Haven and Connecticut. So the Republican Party got a bounce from that convention, even though Trump kind of blew it at the end when he couldn't stop talking. In general, it was very disciplined convention, and they had, coming off the assassination, they're feeling unified. Their dissenters came back in. The Republican Party, is it still a supermajority of Democrats in the state Senate?
Yep.
And close in the House?
Yep.
So the Republican Party came back from that convention in Milwaukee and said, we have a chance now this fall to kind of improve our situation here on the ground, on the coattails of the Republicans. Are they right?
I don't think so. I don't see it in Connecticut. I think in Connecticut is, it's an electorate it's well educated, and I think
until Biden dropped out, New Jersey was suddenly up. That was up for grabs. New York got to 8 points from 20 something. So a lot of educated traditional Democratic voters definitely were fleeing Biden.
Right, and I think it was just based on whether he could do the job or not. And that was no rational person watched that debate and was like, yeah, everything's okay. I mean, like, let's be honest.
First 30 seconds, Vinny, 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's jaw dropped.
Literally everyone's jaw dropped, and we're like this. The texting started. Holy crap, did you watching this? And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm watching it, right? I mean, like, it was a string of, like, text messages from everybody like, this is bad. And so, and once again, I go back to, we are in a far better place as a party with Vice President Harris than we were with President Trump.
And how do you feel about her as the pick in general? Would she have been your pick?
I think when Joe Biden picked her as vice president, she was the odds-on favorite to succeed him. I don't think she knew when it was going to happen, but she has put herself in position to be by far and away the best candidate we have.
And now you have candidates running. We don't usually have many, even number of years, we don't have many competitive elections. You're still an important person. I know the governors in the past would be calling Vin Mauro because New Haven used to have the most votes of any Democratic city, the biggest margin of victory for statewide Democratic candidates. Yep. We don't have a governor's races here. Is that still true that we produce more Stanford beats?
Yeah, we'll put up. Our goal is always to vote the most, have the most plurality. So that
didn't happen last time, right?
No, we still had the most plurality. We just didn't have the most vote. I mean, only because Stanford added about 30,000 more people than New Haven did.
Wow.
So their numbers were far higher, and they're 3 times the size of us. So geographically, well, Stanford is essentially Stanford and North Stanford. Originally. I mean, Stanford geographically is gigantic. So
but they don't have more people than New Haven, do they?
Oh yeah, they have more people than New Haven.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about, we only have one contested race that you can be involved in, right? And that's
the primary. Yeah, we have primary.
For, in the
For
Robin Porter's race.
Yep.
You got, she was state rep,
yep.
Isn't it, running again? That was a surprise.
Yes, it
and
was.
You guys have endorsed Democratic Town
was.
Committee, and the Hampden political leaders have endorsed Steve Winter, who's from New Haven. It's a district that's both New Haven and Southern Hampden. Yep. And then Abdul Osmanu, who's a Hampden council person. He's got the backing of other very politically active people in Hampden who, they kind of had it. It seems, I'm wondering if there's a split in that coalition that came to power when they overthrew the Lang administration. It seems like that coalition is now in 2 places. You have the mayor and the council president with Winter, and a lot of the activists who are part of that same team, including some of the candidates running are with Osmanu. Yeah. And both Osmanu and Winter are very hardworking candidates. They knock on a lot of doors. And you have like AFL-CIO with Winter, but you have Working Families Party and DSA with Osmanu. How do you read it? What's being tested in this election?
I think this one's about the candidates, right? I mean, like, this is, endorsements, mean something and they don't mean something. In a race like this is about, the candidate themselves knocking on the right doors and connecting with people.
So does your town committee not matter?
Oh, no, it matters. But what I'm saying is like, when you're talking about a local race like this in a state rep district, which is knockable, right? I mean, there are certain districts that are just not knockable, right? It's just too big. Like, this is a race where, I know for a fact that Steve is knocking on, hundreds of doors, connecting with people in a way. And he is, it's funny. I mean, Steve is really a unifying person in this city. People of all factions in this city think he's just, a hardworking, good human and a good soul.
Yesterday he had a big announcement. He identified a lot of federal money that he's bringing for...
I mean, listen,
heat pumps at Union Station.
I like Abdul a lot. I mean, I think
they both have real futures, and that's also a generational change.
They do, and I think it's important, right? I mean, like, listen, primaries happen. I mean, like, this is
primaries are good for the party.
They're always good for the party, both right? Parties, like, you have the conversation, and then the important part about a primary though is you rally behind the winner, right? Because if people then say, "Well, I'm going to go run as an independent," okay. But you want to use the party, then use the party. But respect the party then.
So positions like mayor every 2 years, state rep every 2 years, they don't usually have primaries. So when they do, John DeStefano, the mayor, used to say, that's because something's happening in town that people want to work out. Yeah. State of the schools was one of them, corruption. What's being worked out here?
This is different. This is different. This is an open seat.
Open seat, right.
Right. I think when it's an open seat, I think you get people who have been long thinking about running for office or have been in office and say, I want to take whatever ability I have and go to try something else. So I don't think there's anything being worked out in this one because, like I said, no one is challenging anyone and their job they did, which is, I think, the case which John was talking about. This is an open seat, and this is an identification of who people like and who people trust, and it's a connection to voters that they probably haven't had in a long time, because when you don't have a real contested race, people don't knock on as many doors. So I think that district, the 94th district, is being well served right now because they have two candidates and volunteers knocking on their door saying, what's important to you?
It also kind of feels like that district represents the way that New Haven has bled into Hampton.
Yeah.
Culturally, politically. Would you agree
absolutely.
that Southern Hampton, not Northern Hampton, Southern Hampton kind of feels like part of New Haven?
Once again, you could drive down, Dixwell Avenue and you have a hard time deciphering where, what
Shelton,
town you're in.
You have a very subtle change in the street signs.
Exactly. Right, exactly, right?
The street signs look a little bit different.
They're just a little bit different.
But
listen, I think it's I think primaries they're important, and you have them, and then at the end of the primary, you put your arm around the other person and you say, we're still on the same team, because there really is in Connecticut another team.
And what's that team?
But that's the Republican Party.
Do you see any races in the fall you're going to have to work hard on?
Yeah, listen, I think whether the Republicans are running contested races or not, I think you always run the race the way you're supposed to run the race.
Even
right?
No opponent.
Right, even if you don't have a tough opponent, you run the race so that you connect with. It's your chance to connect with voters at a different level, right? You're communicating with them. You're explaining the things you've done. You're explaining the things you want to work on, because it's not just what you've done; it's what your next vision is, right? So I think when you run for office in this city, I think this city is different than other places. Like, the electorate here wants to hear from you. They want to know what's going on. They're plugged in. And, I mean, not to blow smoke up your ass, but it's partly because you have the Independent, right? Like, the New Haven Independent has played such an important role in keeping voters and candidates connected, right?
It's kind of, we love elections. We love
right. You love the elections.
And also the elections, the issues that come up in the elections on the
But
doors.
that's important, right? Yeah. I think the difference between a Hartford and a Bridgeport and New Haven, in a lot of ways, is your presence in keeping people honest. And I think that's an important role.
Bridgeport, what a mess. This has been like a gift to the Republican Party nationally.
Always.
Voter fraud. What do you take from that about how to run politics? I mean, they have people who are officials in the party who've twice been found responsible for ballot fraud and get reelected as leaders of the party and keep doing it.
I think you keep getting away with it until you don't get away with it anymore, and I think that's been the mentality down there for generations. Here's the thing: people could say whatever they want. We run a clean operation here. We run a clean operation. We don't play funny games. We play it straight. We don't do the absentee ballot. Who cares who votes on the machine? We're going to get, 2,000 absentee ballots. Like, we don't do that here.
I did notice our numbers going down.
Right, because
they used to be pretty high.
Right, but I think this year is a little bit different. I mean, we're going to institute, early voting this for the first time in Connecticut history, right? That's going to be an important part of this, because when you look at who votes, we say this all the time, as a party in New Haven. We don't have just the structure of people who work a traditional 9-to-5 job. We have people who work second shift and third shifts. And we have a lot of people who work second shift and third shifts. Well, sometimes getting to the election, to a polling place on that one day is a lot harder for someone who's working a third shift.
So how's it going to affect your job? How much are you focusing on early voting?
I think we're going to have I think we're going to try a couple different things and experiment a little bit on how to communicate with people that they can vote early.
Will be an example?
Well, I think part of it, quite frankly, is assuring people that it's legal, right? I think you have to also get over why are you telling me to vote today? Is that really today? Because there's a skepticism to some of this. So I think what the first part of this is education. Educating folks that early voting starts, you can actually show up the Tuesday before and vote in City Hall.
I'm glad we don't do more than a week, because I think it's not right to have people voting on election where the facts might change.
100%. I completely agree with that. But I think the education part of it is important.
So what about ground games, Vincent? So you grew up, your father was a town chair, you've been in politics your whole life.
Yep.
You work hard on a ground game. I was startled a few years ago. I ran into Roy Ogrosso, who's sort of like one of the chief strategists in the state, political strategist. He said that at most a ground game affects 2% of the outcome of election. He was talking statewide.
Yeah.
How much, because all this effort gets put into like calling people, making your list of ones and twos, meaning most likely voters, making sure they have a ride to the poll. Yep. Does that usually affect the outcome?
I think, yes, it does, right? I mean, like, there's no way it doesn't, right? I think the identification of people.
Or is it because a lot of the really contested elections are so much on the margins that 1 or 2% counts?
Absolutely.
Like in Georgia for the Senate.
Listen, when you're talking about like the 2 Malloy races that he had, for governor, I mean, the margin of victory was so
New Haven
small.
was the margin.
Right.
That's why you guys got all those free lunches at Adriana's,
exactly.
right?
Although I didn't get any of those lunches,
You didn't
actually.
get any lunches?
I didn't get any of those lunches.
Okay.
But
the union people got the
yeah, exactly. But I think part of it is, like those contested races, literally you're pulling votes till 7:45 just to make sure they get there by 8:00.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Right. And you know what? You could tell people, you explain to people, listen, as long as you're in line, you get to vote. Like those are important things to do.
What about nationally? Like, so the Trump people, I'm very interested in how Trump people run this election. I think they've been very smart strategically. One thing they're looking at is they've shut down a lot of the ground game. They said we spent a lot of money that was wasted because Trump's master at free media.
Yeah.
And a lot of voting, especially in national elections, is the people on the airwaves, right?
Yeah.
And do you think they're right that a more targeted kind of get out the vote, less money, but smarter is the approach moving forward? How important is going to be the ground game moving forward?
I think a ground game in a presidential is people vote in a presidential. Right? I mean, people are going to come out and vote in this presidential election.
So
right?
it's really about local.
So it's how it morphs into the local races. That's the net outcome of it. I think in New Haven this year you'll see there's a lot of new people that moved into the city, and they probably did so around right after COVID, right? So you have a whole.
They'll come out for presidential. And then
they'll come out for because when you think about it, a lot of folks who left New York City or left wherever they were for COVID, they weren't sure they were staying here, right? So they didn't really vote here in 2020 in the presidential. Some of them got a little bit involved in 21. Some of them voted again in 22 because it was a gubernatorial, and it's like, well, wait a minute, are we staying here? Okay, if we're staying here, then we're staying here.
And we do have thousands of new
and I think that's part of. So I think a presidential sort of hits the fast forward on that.
Is it an opportunity for you this year to meet some of these people? Like,
I think that's exactly right.
360 state? Do you ever get people from there?
Right. I think that is the effort now to talk to those folks and say, wait a minute, if you're going to stay in New Haven, if New Haven is now your home, this is how you make it a little bit better, right? Get involved. And
then before I let you go, because I kept you long and I said I was going to, people, the governor's election is 2 years away. People, just like they're waiting if Biden's going to run, people are wondering if Lamont's going to run. His health is fine. But I mean, right. But there are all these people who quietly, as you know, have been going around New Haven.
Some of them not so quietly.
Yeah, so you got Josh Elliott, you got Susan Bice, who's lieutenant governor, you got Luke Bronin, the former mayor of Hartford,
yeah.
You got William Tong, the attorney general. Am I missing anyone?
I mean, I'm sure there's a few more that are thinking about it.
And how do you see it? You think Lamont will run again?
Hey, listen, if Governor Lamont wants to run again, I think it is a clear path for him, right?
Third terms are treacherous.
Third terms are tough, right?
I mean, look at what happened to Roland. He always said, what was I thinking?
Exactly.
He wins in a landslide, and then he's in prison.
Right. So I think this is one of those, like, I think if the governor wants to run again, it's a personal decision. Mm-hmm. Right, I think he's accomplished everything he's ever really wanted to accomplish as governor, and he's done a marvelous job of it. I think the next part is a personal decision. Like, do I want to keep doing this?
Well, he's a person who's going to be bored, even though he's around 70.
Yeah,
but he'd be bored just going on the golf.
And links. I think that right, exactly. So I think it's more of a personal decision for him, and if he wants to do it again, I think he'd have the backing of everyone in the party.
What's your advice, though? Should he make room for younger people, or?
I also believe in, like, you ride the horse while it's going good. So, I mean, change for change's sake doesn't work. Right. Speaking of which, by the way, today is Marty Looney's birthday.
Oh, okay.
So there you go.
Happy birthday to Martin Looney.
Yes.
Vince Mauro, it's always such a pleasure to have you in. I'm hoping we get you back one day the host role.
I will reach out to Adam and Joel and tell them that we have to we got to come back for maybe on a quarterly basis to do a sports show.
Well, they're always welcome. Vincent Mauro, Democrat Town Chair at WNHH-FM. Thanks to Harry Jaros behind the controls. We're going to take a little break with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace.
Not going to lie to you, I don't have this one on my playlist.
What is on your playlist?
Not this.
And when we get back, we'll have Joshua Perry, an attorney in New Haven who has a new novel out, reviewed in the New York Times, and it's a great read called Seraphim. So stay tuned. Listen to the Afro Semitic Experience, and we'll be back with you on the rebound.